I'm back with Sasha. If you're new, this is the Dope Sick Show. And I got a story, a prison story about somebody we called the Dancing Queen. So when I got to the low security, went out on the yard, just walked around, took a look at the place with a buddy of mine who was showing me around the place. The yard at the low security, see, I was at the low, then I went to medium, then I went back to the low. This is when I first got there. The yard's big at the low. The medium, it's small. It sucks. They got a giant indoor basketball court at the low. Uh, all kinds of tennis courts, two full tennis courts, four handball courts, two walls. It's on each side's one. Soccer field, football field, softball field, and it's got a quarter-mile track that goes around the football field, but it's got like a half-mile track that goes around the perimeter of the yard. So there's all this space, and off in one corner, there's this dude, and he's out there dancing like a fool. He's like it's like about a 40-year-old white dude, but I mean his hair's gone white a little bit early. No tattoos, just like kind of like a dad body, you know what I mean? Just this, and I'm thinking it's just some weirdo out there dancing. You know, he's got his headphones in. They got radios at this point. They don't have the MP3 players. The MP3 players happened after I've been there for about 3 weeks. So I see this dude. I'm like, what in the world? And, my buddy's like, yeah, it's Tank. He said, a couple of us call him Dancing Queen, though. I'm like, all right. Well, I heard him talking in the building. I just saw his mannerisms, just in general. Heard him talking in passing. I didn't talk to him, though. And, to be honest, just his mannerisms, how he talked, I mean, he seemed like he was gay. I mean, just straight up. Nothing wrong if you're gay, you know what I mean? Live your life. But I mean, this dude seemed like he was full on gay. Now, as I'm learning the layout of the low, they got like these handful of tables that people sit at, and that's like the white dudes that are all about the paperwork, just checking nonstop. There's independents and stuff, and it's kind of like just a gang of white people. It's got a whole lot of people with Nazi tattoos, stuff like that. And I see the Dancing Queen sitting with the Nazi people and the paperwork people. It's like, and he looked like a chomo to me. I mean, he looks like what I would guess a chomo would be. From looking at all these other weird, middle-aged white dudes in there, and hearing how he talked. And not trying to be rude or not, you know what I mean? My sister, she lives out in California. Now I grew up a little different, but my sister, she moved out in California. She brought a couple of her gay friends. They're a couple. They're together. Nice couple, bunch of gay. I don't have anything against gay people, but like when you heard how he talked and all this, like he just seemed like it was fabulous. And I was like, he's sitting with the paperwork people. What's he doing now? At the London meeting, they called that group of independent white people, they called them the haters. And I'm like, first off, that dude sounds like he's gay. Okay? Like all these people, Nazi tattoos and stuff. What in the world? And so, I gotta know more. Like, so I asked my buddy Fox, at the time, I'm like, man, what's the story with dude? I said, isn't that the paperwork tables that people sit at? See, Fox was, he was a dude, he ran what's called an OxyTrain. Now, OxyTrain is getting a bunch of people. It's back when they had, the peel mills were a big thing in Broward County. He lived in Kentucky. He was from, I believe he's from Florida. I mean, he moved to Kentucky just to sell it. So he was getting people, loading them up in a van, taking them down there, paying them each $1,000 a piece. They go see this doctor. They get him a script of OxyContin. And I mean, that script, he make, $5,000 to $10,000 for the prescriptions he was getting per person. and he got 5 years for it for pills. It was his first time being in trouble, and he got 5 years fed time. Seen the pictures and stuff. I mean, he had a gold chain, you know what I mean? Giant gold chain, Escalade, everything else. You know, he was doing the thing. So, I mean, but he wrote independent, and he told me, he gave me good advice. He's like, listen, dude, those dudes, he said, getting involved, any type thing like that, he says, the biggest thing about them, he says, they like to act like they're just a bunch of good white dudes that look out for each other. He says all they do is gossip about each other, and you know, in terms of doing anything, they're not active doing anything. They're doing stuff to each other. At the mediums, he says here they just talk about each other, and that was the truth. And at the medium, the most violence you saw among the haters were among themselves. But anyway, he told me about this dude Tank. Now Tank apparently he was a raver, and you know them ravers, they like to dance. They likes to dance. So they do all that, you know, all that, do that stuff. I don't know how it goes, you know what I mean? They look like they're having a hell of a time, though, man. They look like they're having fun. But they're little spunions, you know, taking acid and everything else. Now, did eat a couple times, but I was mostly an acid type dude, you know what I mean? That was my main thing. I did that every weekend for probably, God, I want to say like 9 months. I did a lot every weekend. And, you know, I live off everything today. I've been off heroin since April 9th, 2010. But that was the thing back then. So I'm not endorsing that. You know what I mean? But, you know, in terms of, you know, different things and stuff like that, I don't look at it as that as like a superior evil as long as it's a reputable, you know what I mean, source and stuff like that. I think there have been studies that actually show that, you know, with certain thing, supervised treatment with pure MDMA and LSD, that can help people work through a lot of things. But anyway, figured I'd say that before I say this. So Tank's story was he was a raver, and he got a little ecstasy, sold a little ecstasy. Well, apparently he sold some ecstasy to some big guy in the military's daughter, and she died. And they hit him with a rack of time, a couple decades in prison. And yeah, it's sad. Now, you know, I can't remember what it was, if it had what it had in it, you know, exactly. I mean, this was like before the time of fentanyl being like a thing. So it's hard to tell what it was, and you know, people sometimes get carried away, take more than they should. Sometimes with ecstasy, you know, I knew a few people that sold a whole rack of it, and the double stacks, triple stacks. Sometimes people have to take more than one because it wasn't as good as the other. So if somebody thought it wasn't as good as it could have been, they took more than they thought. That's the thing with drugs. It's not FDA regulated like these clandestine drugs that are made, you know, underground that aren't regulated. And, you know, even with the pills that people think that they're getting what they know what they're getting, you don't anymore. Because that's the number one drug that's killing people in this country right now are counterfeit roxycodone 30s. There are more roxycodone 30s that are counterfeit that are being brought across the border than there are actual roxycodone that are being prescribed at pharmacies. So anyway, he sells it. It's an unfortunate thing, and to be honest, you know, I know, like my apartment was the place where some stuff was sold, and that's ultimately what gave me prison time for actually being a drug dealer. I got about a year and a month in a drug program, but for, you know, somebody showing up at my apartment that I did not invite over to my apartment, that I not profit or arrange a deal off of, I got an 8-year federal sentence, in which I did a year in jail, 5 in prison, year off for good time, year off for the RDAP drug program, and you know, it's sad when people die, but I mean, with the overdose numbers being 100,000 a year right now in the country, if you were to put everybody that overdosed got the drugs from somebody, are you going to put 100,000 new people in prison every year? The population of the federal prison system's like 150,000. Okay, if you put 100,000 people extra in prison per year, in, you know, in 15 years, the prison system would be 10 times what it is right now. I mean, look at the rates that we're already have the most people in prison at any country in the world. I mean, people make choices to use stuff and they know it's a risk. And, it's sad when people die, but, but anyway, so that's what he's in there for. The MP3 players came out. They've got like this iTunes type setup, like all kinds of stuff. The MP3 players hook up to the computer. You have to revalidate them every 2 weeks. Now, what that means is you have to hook it up, log in, revalidate it. That way, if somebody steals your MP3 player, it'll only work for 2 weeks. That way, people won't be stealing MP3 players. You can get a song for about $1.50 a piece. They got techno, they got comedy shows. That's how I found out who Jim Norton was. Now, he must have got him some crazy techno, because after the MP3 players came out, it was a summer day. I got there August 2012. I went out in the yard, and Tank, Dancing Queen, was off in the corner. Now, he created this contraption. It was it was a few tennis balls, actually, if I remember right, that had like this string coming out of them. You know how rave people have like those things that they swing and all this? And he has sunglasses, something, his shoulders hurt, but he has these sunglasses on and he's just smiling, dancing with his headphones in like a fool with these tennis balls, doing this wild thing. It was crazy to watch, and you could tell he'd done it quite a time or two with, whatever contraption they do it at the raves. That was a sight to see. And, he was a good dude for real, too, though. And, nobody's going to call him Dance Queen to his face, and I heard him a few times talking about those freaking chomos. I hate them. And, see, that's something that's sad. And, something that, somebody listen to this. If you're gay and you go to prison, you go to jail, go to prison, nothing against when you're free, live your life. But in there, I think Tank kept it in the closet. I don't think he ever acted on it. It would have gotten around because people already assumed it about him. I think he knew he had that much time. And it's sad because it's not right, but it's how prison is. And I'm telling it like it is. I don't make these rules. These are just how the rules are, so don't get mad at me for them. But gay people get lumped in like just not pretty much right in there with the child molesters. Now that ain't right, because gay people, just because somebody they have any interest in kids. And I think he saw that, and he decided he wasn't going to act on it. He wasn't going to do anything like that. This is my guess. I don't know that he was gay. He could have just been a really effeminate man with a really effeminate voice, and just like for real. But his life was so much easier, assuming he was, because he didn't act on it. He didn't claim to be it. And, he wasn't a child molester. And he lived a life as a person who was just a straight man going through there who was in there for a drug crime. And he got treated accordingly. Now, behind his back, people made fun of him for the dancing thing. But nobody made fun of him to his face. Everybody they knew he had a rack of time for Sandra. Everybody was cool with Tank. For real. And, that's something, keep in mind, because gay people are the number one targets for crimes, to get extorted, to get sexually abused, all that type of stuff. And maybe he knew that. And he knew that he had a couple decades doing prison. So he didn't want to be a victim of violence. So he just kept it quiet, kept it in the closet. And his life went a whole lot easier because of that. And, that's something, keep going. Is it right? No, it's not. It's a different world. Be who you want to be. But prison, go back 60, 70 years. Into racial segregation and everything else. I will talk about it. Even in the low security, it is completely racially segregated in so many facets of the prison system, and it's not done by the staff. It's done by the inmates. The staff like it. They like to turn everybody against each other because we're fighting with each other. We're not fighting with them. But that's just a bit of advice for certain people. God forbid you listen to me, so you're not going to end up in prison. So, you're going to take some of this advice and, live your life right, learn from my mistakes. But God forbid you do, and you're a gay dude. Like, Tank was a cool dude. We all messed with him. But, man, you can't convince me Tank wasn't gay. I mean, he just talked like he just was something fabulous. Like, oh my God. Like, even his mannerism with his hand, like, oh my, I can't stand these chomos. Like, just... Can't tell me. It's like I said, you know what I mean? Live your life, be who you want to be in the free world, but in there's certain things you can do to reduce your risk factors. Like for instance, for me, being a drug addict. Didn't do drugs in there. You know why? That's a source of major violence. Certain gamblers didn't gamble in there. Certain ones did. Certain drug addicts did. Drugs, gambling, and punks. Now, punk is not even a derogatory term. It's prison slang. It means gay people, transsexual people. It's just a general term. It's what it is. But before I went to prison, I heard don't do drugs. As long as you don't do drugs, as long as you don't gamble, as long as you don't mess with the punks. I'm like, well, okay, gambling and messing with punks, that's two things that, I'm not going to be doing. The drugs, that'll be an issue, though. But in my first few months in there, I drank a whole lot of that tomato wine. I even drank the moonshine they made in there a few times, and I got in a number of fights. Once I quit doing that, my life became a lot simpler. But, and even then, even though the gay people are the ones that get preyed upon, just from what I've seen, I call it the 6-month rule. You'd see it all the time. Dudes that you thought like that do a lot of gay bashing, talking about this person, that person, and all that. You find out behind the scenes they get put out there sooner or later. They're kind of like self-loathing people, I think. Like they're like, they're gay themselves, and they're doing gay stuff behind the scenes, but they got to talk that trash and hate. But yet they're doing that behind the scenes. It's because they hate who they are. You know what I mean? Personally, with that, it's just something, you know what I mean? It's like there's certain things I ain't got to try. Like, in my life, I've never eaten mayonnaise. I don't have to try it to know it ain't for me. I just look at it, I'm like, ooh. And I'm not saying, you're gross if you're gay, you know what I mean? Live your life, what you into. I'm just saying with mayonnaise, I look at mayonnaise and I'm like, that just ain't for me. But, just try and give some advice here, you know what I mean? Just give my take on things. And Tank was a good dude, I talked to him a handful of times about his stuff that he's in there and everything else, and, he's out there, he's happy when he was dancing, listening to his music, but he seemed like a sad dude for real. Sad that, a couple decades of his life were lost. And that's another thing with drugs, too, Not only, I've lost 44 friends under the age of 35, the most recent being the one who did these tattoos just a couple weeks back. Been talking about it ever since, because it does mess with me. But, keep on cranking out these stories. But that story, but the Dancing Queen. He probably never even knew people called him that behind his back, because nobody ever said it around him. And, he probably would have stood up and smacked or fought somebody, because even though he talked feminine, and even though he was a cool guy and chill, and he liked to dance, he had a couple decades, so he's going to live his life, and he wasn't going to get messed with, get played with. So, a lot of people have respect for that man for that.